She came back with another man's hand still in her hair.
Fix this.
He'd gone 9 days without blood, a fine trimmer in his hands he kept hidden, while he pulled the pins out one by one, counting them. When she caught the shaking, she slid the cold cup toward his knee and said it was for the dogs. He drank with his eyes closed so she wouldn't see them wet, and never once asked why she always knew exactly how much to give. Chapter 1. The Interrogation. There are 3 bowls on the wall this morning that were not there yesterday. I count them, while Helena Fallow arranges her instruments left to right by size, the way she always does. Smallest blade nearest her hand. The bowls are mine, or rather, they hold what is left of me. Gray flakes scraped from where the silver has been eating my wrists, each one labeled in her even hand. Day 14, 3rd hour, hooked rasp. Day 17, dawn, flat file. She keeps the ash like a midwife keeps a record of a difficult birth. Rebels, it turns out, invent ceremonies for the things they would rather not name. Queens do the same. I could have told her that, if she had asked. She has not asked the thing she came to ask yet. I have a moment. So instead, I'm thinking about the warmth. I do not have a word for it. It is not heat. There is no heat left in me. I have not fed since before they took me, and my body has begun the slow work of forgetting how. It is more like a direction, a pull, low and steady, the way a needle leans toward north without knowing why it leans. It has been getting stronger. This morning, when Helena came through the door with her keys jingling at her belt, the pull lurched so hard I do not know what I almost did. Opened my mouth. Said something that was not the thing I always say. A taste of snow at the back of my throat. A hollow. I push it down. I'm good at pushing things down. It is, if we are being honest, the only thing I have ever been truly excellent at. The left manacle hangs a finger width loose. It has hung loose since my first day here. My eyes slide past it. By now, that evasion has become a discipline. To look at it would be to consider it. And to consider it would require me to want somewhere to be that is not here. And that is a question I have been careful, for nearly 3 weeks now, not to let myself open. The smell of silver on my bone is old coins held under the tongue, lightning in a mouthful of ash. The wrongness where the metal touches me is not burning anymore. Burning was the first week, a clean and honest pain. Now it is only a slow wrongness, like a word repeated until it stops meaning anything. Silver, silver, silver.
You are awake.
You've ruined my morning constitutional. I usually walk the grounds at this hour.
She does not smile. She has stopped pretending to find me amusing, which I take as a professional compliment. She sets down the small blade and folds her roughened hands and breathes, once, slow, the way she does before each question, steadying herself like an archer.
Where is she?
Question has worn down into ritual. The 104th time, or thereabouts. I've lost the precise count, which troubles me more than the silver does because I have never once in my life lost count of anything. I open my mouth, and for the length of a single heartbeat, something else nearly comes out. Not 5 words. A place. A warmth with edges to it. Snow over black stone and a sky that was neither dawn nor dusk, and I close my throat around it. My jaw flexes. She watches the jaw flex. She has learned to read me the way I once learned to read another woman, by the small, involuntary tells. and I resent that she has earned this fluency.
I don't know.
A beat.
I'm sorry. You hadn't asked yet.
She hits me. It is a good strike, square and professional, and my jaw comes loose from its hinge with a sound like a wet branch. The pain blooms white and then settles into the larger gray wrongness of everything else, and I work the joint slowly back into place with my tongue while she stands there, breathing, her hand still raised. Her hand is shaking. I notice this with great interest. Helena Fallow does not shake. She has, by her own account, broken vampires 3 times my age in half the time I have lasted, and she did it without trembling, because trembling is for people who are not certain of their work. But her hand shakes now, and it is not from frustration. I have seen frustration. This is closer to the way a person's hand shakes when they have understood something they did not want to understand. She has understood that I'm not afraid of her. Not because I'm brave, because I'm already standing on the far side of the worst thing that could ever be done to me, and from over here, her instruments look very small. I find this funny in a way that is also terrible, and the smile starts before I can stop it, and then I do stop it, hard, because a smiling man is a man with something left to lose, and I am not supposed to look like that.
You should bring wine next time.
I work my jaw.
If you want conversation. I haven't had a guest last past the second hour in 100 years.
She lowers her hand. She looks at me for a long moment, and there is something in her pale blue eyes that unsettles me. Neither hatred nor duty. Something closer to grief.
You're not protecting her. You genuinely don't know.
That's what I keep telling you.
That's worse.
She gathers her instruments. The torch gutters as the door opens.
I don't know which of you it's worse for.
And then she is gone. And the room is mine again. And the warmth comes back up the moment I am alone, the way it always does. Patient, certain. North. I stare at my own hands until they stop belonging to me. When I let myself retreat, and I do let myself, because memory is the one room in this body the rebels have not learned to enter, the warmth follows me in. It always follows now. And at the edge of it, the way you sense a shape underwater before you can name it, there is the memory of something she said to me once, in the cold, in the snow, that I chose not to hear. Not the words. Only the shape of a voice I refuse to make clearer. I do not reach for it. I reach further back instead. To the beginning. To the girl before any of it. Chapter 2. The Alley. The first time I saw Diana Marrowfin, she was cursing God in an alley that smelled of fish guts and human waste, and I forgot I was hungry. This is not a small thing for one of my kind. I was 3 days empty, and the lowland winter had got into my bones, and I had drifted into that alley the way starving things drift, without intention, following the warm thread of a heartbeat. I had no house. I've never had a house. I was the kind of vampire the powerful ones do not bother to kill because killing me would be like drowning a kitten. Technically possible, beneath their dignity. Weak-born. No inherited strength. Whatever power I would ever have was going to be the kind that lives between 2 people, not in one. So I came to feed, and instead I stood in a doorway and listened to a starving girl argue with a sky she didn't believe in. She sat on an overturned crate with her knees drawn up, gnawing at the seam of her own sleeve. Actually gnawing it, the way you'd worry a bone, because there was nothing else in reach. Deep auburn hair, filthy, falling past her shoulders in ropes. Ivory skin gone gray-blue with cold. She had a face even then that made you want to look longer than was polite. High cheekbones, a pointed chin, a faint scar near one brow she would later refuse to explain to anyone, including me. She was perhaps 17. She was furious.
And if you exist, which I doubt, you have a great deal to answer for, and a very small window in which to do it.
Behind her, under a broken fish crate, half hidden beneath the spread of her thin coat, a smaller child slept. I made some sound, a breath, a shifting of my weight. The knife was out before I had finished moving. A rusted, ugly little thing she must have kept up her sleeve, which explained the gnawing, perhaps the way a person chews near a hidden blade out of habit. Her mouth stayed shut, her feet stayed planted. She looked directly at me with her strange, pale gold eyes and said, in a voice perfectly level,
If you want my throat, come closer. I'd hate for you to die without my carving a story into you first. Something memorable, something your friends will ask about.
I laughed. I had not laughed in something close to a decade. It came out of me wrong, rusty, more cough than laughter, and it startled us both.
I was admiring your vocabulary. Truly. A very small window in which to do it. You have a gift.
She did not lower the knife, but her eyes moved over me. The worn coat, the narrow shoulders, the hollow cheeks. And I watched her revise her estimate of the threat I posed the downward and downward, until she lowered the blade exactly halfway and held it there. A compromise between us, which is the most honest thing two desperate creatures can offer each other. Then a man came into the alley. A butcher, by the apron, by the blood and tallow smell of him, big and drunk and squinting.
You, girl, heel of bread, off my cart.
I have witnessed a great many liars since that morning. I have watched a court of professional deceivers practice their craft for the length of a long life. I have never seen anyone lie the way Diana lied to that butcher. She did not deny it. Denial is amateur. She grieved with him. She told him she'd seen the thief, a boy, fair-headed, called Tam, who hung about the fishmonger's 2 streets east. And she described this boy who did not exist with such tender, sorrowful specificity, naming his ragged jacket and his limp and his habit of whistling through a gap in his teeth, that the butcher began to nod, then to thank her, then to apologize for having troubled her, and went stamping off toward the fishmonger's 2 streets east to find a boy named Tam. Only when he was gone did I understand. The bread was not for her. She reached under her coat and broke the stolen heel in 2 and put the smaller half into the small sleeping child's open palm, folding the little fingers closed around it. Then she ate the larger half herself, unhurried, watching me eat the answer to my question off her face.
He's not mine.
She said it before I could ask.
I found him. He cries less when he's fed.
She licked crumbs from her thumb.
Don't make a thing of it. I kept the bigger piece.
She had. I noted that. I would go on noting it for the rest of my life, that even her mercy came with arithmetic, that even when she gave, she counted what she kept. It should have warned me. Everything I needed to know about the woman she would become was sitting in that alley, dividing bread by weight. I chose to find it charming.
You drink blood.
It was not a question.
When I can find someone who isn't trying to carve a story into me.
She considered this. Then she pushed her ragged sleeve up to the elbow and held her thin wrist out across the cold air between us and said, with the weary practicality of a girl who has decided to trade the only currency she has,
A vein for an evening. I'm sick to death of being alone with the sound of my own voice.
I should have refused. I want that on the record. I, the narrator of my own ruin, wanted understood that some part of me knew, even then, that this was the first turn of a key in a lock that had no door behind it. I did not refuse. I crossed the alley and knelt, practically, not dramatically, on the cold filth, because that was already where I lived. And I took her wrist as gently as a starving thing can take anything. And I drank. And she talked. She talked the whole time, which I would learn was the way she let herself be touched, to fill the silence so completely that no tenderness could get a foothold in it. She told me about a cousin who had once chased her into the hills with a kitchen poker over some childhood slight, and how she had wedged herself into a crack beneath a shelf of black stone high in the cold and stayed 2 nights, eating frozen berries off the bushes and imagining, in loving detail, the cousin slipping into a ravine. She told it as spite, as a joke, as weather. She laughed at her own cruelty.
There's a hollow up there, under the black stone, cold as a god's heart. Nothing finds you in it.
She said it the way you'd mention any old hiding place, carelessly, already moving on to the next grievance. I filed it away without knowing why. I file things. It is a sickness of mine. The counting and the cataloging. I tucked away a hollow under black stone, high in the cold, where nothing finds you, and let it sink out of reach for a long time. When I lifted my head, my eyes had gone soft. I felt it happen. So did she. She yanked her wrist back as if I'd bitten down.
Don't.
The level voice had an edge now.
Don't look at me like I'm saving you. I'm barely saving myself.
I came back the next night anyway. I told myself I was hungry. I had eaten the night before. There was a second cup set out by her small fire when I arrived. Animal blood, foul and cold, but set out, placed, near where a person might kneel. She left it unmentioned and kept her gaze from it. She talked about something else entirely, fast and sharp, and let me find it on my own. I sat down beside it. She watched the fire and pretended not to notice. Neither of us said anything. The not saying was the whole of it. Chapter 3. The Palace. The envoy found her by a birthmark on her shoulder, 3 winters later. I was there when he made his careful, oily little bow in the doorway of the rooms we shared by then. A forgotten royal bastard, he called her. A claim that had slept in her blood since before she was born. A claim worth a great deal to certain people who needed a body with the right blood in it to sit in the right chair. She listened to all of it with her face very still. Then she packed. She owned almost nothing. It did not take long. At the door she paused, her gaze fixed on a point just past my shoulder, and she said one word.
Well?
That was all. Well, it was the closest she ever came, in all the years I had her, to asking me to stay. I have turned it over so many times the edges have worn smooth. I followed her, of course. I would have followed her into the sea. The palace took the girl apart with the patience of a craftsman. It took her laugh first, the real one, the one that escaped her by accident, the ugly, delighted bark she'd made in the alley. The court replaced it with a different sound, a smooth, low thing, designed to make a room comfortable rather than to express anything she felt. Then it took her loose stride, the way she used to move like she might run. Then it took the humming. She used to hum, tunelessly, while sharpening her little knives, and one day I realized she had stopped, and I could not remember when. Her teacher in all this was a courtier named Lawrence Grafton, who was very old and very elegant, and walked with a pale wood cane topped in cold metal shaped like a bird's skull. He had buried 4 monarchs. He intended to bury more. He took Diana under his brittle wing and taught her that mercy is a debt The merciful spend their whole lives repaying, and that softness, witnessed, is simply a wound someone has not yet thought to widen. He had a gesture. Before each lesson, he would tap 2 fingers against his own throat, light as a benediction, and say,
"A throat spared becomes a mouth that testifies."
He made cruelty sound like arithmetic. He made it sound reasonable, which is the most dangerous thing cruelty can be. He taught her history, too. He taught her the old taboo from the Eastern Wars, the suspended ones. How vampire blood, given to a dying human in exact and measured doses, can hold a body at the very threshold of death without letting it cross into transformation. Too little, and death finishes its work. Too much, and the change completes, and you have made a vampire who never agreed to be one. He told her of the Glass Prince, kept 3 winters under a chapel floor in precisely that suspension. Alive enough to inherit, dead enough to be imprisoned, neither corpse nor citizen. While the great houses fought over what to do with the throne he sat too near. She learned it as a piece of political machinery, a way a body can be used. I sat in the corner of those lessons, mending her gloves, and learned it as a nightmare with measurements. I do not know why it lodged in me. I file things. Then came the test. There was a stable boy, Milo, perhaps 12, all elbows and wariness, with sun-reddened cheeks and a curry comb he kept in his pocket, and a way of flinching at sudden movement that Diana, watching from her high seat, could not stop watching. He reminded her of someone. She would never say so. I knew anyway. Grafton arranged it like a watchmaker. The boy was accused, falsely, and everyone in the bright cold room knew it was falsely, of carrying a message for a rival bloodline. The trap was elegant. If she pardoned him, the pardon itself would be entered into the record as proof that she was secretly aligned with the rival house, and the boy would be hanged before dawn as her accomplice, and she would be one fatal step nearer the same rope. If she punished him publicly, the court records would show her loyal, and the boy would live, maimed, but alive. So she had to hurt a child who reminded her of herself in order to keep men who called hanging mercy from hanging him. She took the whip. She did it without breaking eye contact with him. 3 strokes, measured, precise, no more than the record required and not one less. The boy made a single sound at the first crack and then bit it back. The court watched from behind their fans and their goblets and saw a queen being firm. I watched and saw something else come apart very quietly behind her still face. She came straight to my room afterward and was sick on my floor. I cleaned it in silence. My hands were steady because steady hands were the only useful thing I would allow them to be. I had learned by then that my usefulness was the rope I had thrown across the gap between us, and that I dared not let it fray. And then a sentence formed in me. Whole. Clear. Heavy enough to change the shape of the room if I let it out. You saved him, and they made you call it cruelty. I had it in my mouth. If I said it, I would be a witness to her softness. And in that palace, a witnessed softness was a thing that could be used, a vein someone would eventually open. I would be doing to her, with kindness, the exact thing Grafton did with malice. I would be making her visible. I closed my mouth. That was the loudest thing I did that year. She stood in my doorway with her face still wet, and no thanks came. None ever would, not once in all the years I knelt for her. She looked at me, and something between us settled into a shape neither of us would ever name. And then the door closed. The deaths that put her on the throne were all very convenient, and none of them, officially, hers. She ruled. She became the name parents used to frighten children into obedience. And years later, when a trembling petitioner begged her for the life of a condemned brother, I watched her tap 2 fingers against her own throat and say, almost as if she did not hear herself doing it,
A throat spared becomes a mouth that testifies.
I do not think she remembered where she had learned it. I did. I file things. Chapter 4. The currency between them. The currency between us was always blood, and it was never, not once, equal. I want to describe it precisely, because the lie I told myself about it lived in the imprecision, and I am done with that lie. Here's the truth, kneeling in firelight, where I spent the better part of my life. She cut her own palm before each feeding. The depth of the cut told you her mood before her face did. I learned to read her in the welling of it, the way a sailor reads weather. A shallow seam meant she was at peace, or as near it as she came. A deep one meant the court had drawn blood from her that day, and she was returning the favor to the only creature who would never report it. She decided, hour by hour, whether I ate. There were stretches of days. There was one stretch of 9. I never asked. Asking would have made it a need, and a need was a handle, and I had spent my whole life making sure I had no handles she could grip and lift me by, and she never, not once in all those years, put her own mouth to my skin. I gave. She received. The asymmetry was the entire architecture of us. The silence around that absence was a room I lived in, and I called it home. There was a season around then when she began moving me. Small errands, meaningless, dressed as routine. She sent me to inventory the East Granary the very night assassins poisoned 3 cupbearers at a council dinner, and I learned of the poisoning only at dawn, returning with a list of barley sacks in my hand. She moved me from her chamber door to the chapel roof for a week, costing me the hours of standing near her that I lived for, and I counted it a punishment I could not make, a coolness in her I turned over and over and could not solve. I felt each move as a dismissal. I was wrong about every one of them. I would not understand that for a long time. I want to tell you about one night. They funnel, all those years, into one night for me now. She sat on the floor between my knees in her private chamber, her back to my chest, while I drew a comb through that long auburn hair, and she rebuilt her face for the morning's court. On the table, wine, sealing wax, a narrow red ribbon from some defeated old house, a cup of cold animal blood still withheld from me. 9 days had passed since she last offered. My hands were beginning to shake when I thought she could not see. A fine tremor, hunger walking up the bones of my fingers. She drew the small knife across her palm. Shallow tonight. She had got perhaps 3 swallows into me when the summons came. A council page's knock. Urgent. She closed her fist. The blood she had drawn ran down the inside of her own wrist, and a single drop fell to the floor between us, dark on pale stone. I watched it fall and kept my knees planted. There is a particular discipline in watching what you are starving for hit the floor and remaining where you kneel, and I had a long mastery of it. Then the inner door, the one to the rooms where a certain noble had been installed that season, a lover taken for reasons of treaty rather than appetite, opened a hand's width, and the man's voice drifted through. He was asking idly whether the vampire ought to be sent away, whether she trusted it.
No.
Worse than no. She rose, smoothing her skirts, and told me to take a post just inside the inner door, under the pretense of guarding it. The lover, she said, had been asking questions lately about which of her servants she trusted and from which faction those servants had come. It would be useful to know whether the man's curiosity was idle or bought. So I stood with my palms flat against the wood while she went to her lover, and through the door, low and clear and entirely without tenderness, she used my name. Not the servant's name the court knew me by. My name. The full one. The one from the alley, the one she had not spoken aloud in years. She set it down in front of the lover the way you set down bait, to see if it would be picked up and carried out and repeated later in some other room by some other faction, so she would know who had paid for whatever the man murmured to her after. She turned the one private thing I had into a test of someone else's loyalty. I stood with my refusing hands flat against the door, and my ears open while my name became a tool in a stranger's mouth. This, too, I dressed as trust. That she only used what she could not bear to lose carelessly. I have a gift for finding the door in a windowless room. She came back hours later with her hair pinned up in the lover's court style, a fashion of that rival house, a style that announced whose hands had been in it.
Fix this.
She said it sitting before the mirror.
I cannot appear in the morning to have been touched by that house.
So I unpinned the proof of another man's hands from her hair, pin by pin, while she watched me do it in the glass. She knew exactly what she had asked of me. I knew that she knew. Neither of us looked away from the mirror, where our two faces hung side by side in the candlelight, and I took down another man's evening from her hair and set the pins in a neat row, counting them. Because counting is what I do when there is a thing in my chest I am refusing to set loose. And then, because she was not, has never been, only cruel, she did the thing she would never name. Her eyes caught the tremor in my hands and slid away. She slid the cup of cold animal blood a few inches across the table, into the reach of a kneeling man, and said, to the air, to no one,
"That's for the dogs, if you're too proud."
Apology had nothing to do with it. Animal blood to a starving vampire is bread crusts to a starving man, enough to keep you upright and nothing more. Still, it made the difference between collapsing in the corridor at dawn and standing through morning court without disgracing her. It was care wearing the costume of contempt, so that no one, including her, perhaps especially her, could ever call it kindness. I looked from the cup to her face.
Don't.
She said it without turning around.
Don't look at me like I'm saving you.
I drank with my eyes closed so she would not see them wet. A kitchen servant brought the wine up that night, and most nights, a quiet, watchful man with ink-stained fingers and gray-green eyes, Nathaniel something, who set the tray down and saw, every time, a vampire arranging himself on a floor, like a piece of furniture his mistress might want later. He saw the cup angled toward my knee, close enough to keep me alive, far enough that no one could ever accuse her of having put it there. I did not know it then, but I learned it later. That he watched the cold cup creep toward my knee and the warm blood drip wasted to the floor, and decided somewhere in those nights that the queen had to fall. I finished the hair. She finished her face. We did not speak. I have spent a long time telling myself those were the tender hours. They were the only hours. Chapter 5. The Wine Cellar. The last night I saw her human. She was standing at her window looking at the city, and she did not send me away. I came up, because I always came up when she was awake at that hour. Her sleeplessness called to me the way the warmth calls to me now. The candle had burned almost to the socket. She was dressed for sleep, but had clearly not been near it. On the table beside the cellar key, lay my winter cloak, folded too neatly, with a care I would not understand for 3 more days. I should explain what I did not yet understand. Her spies had brought word of the rebellion 3 weeks before. She had known. And in those 3 weeks she had moved me, quietly, by small, meaningless errands, out of every place death intended to visit. The granary, the chapel roof, the inner corridor she had taken me from would be the first route through in a siege. Every coolness I had counted as punishment had been a hand on my collar, pulling me back from a blade I never saw. I had felt each one as a dismissal. I understand them now as something uglier and more tender than that, something I still do not have a clean word for. She said my name, the full one, from the alley. She had not said it tenderly to me in years, only as bait, that once. She said it now to the window glass, to the dark city, not turning around.
Go down and count the bottles for me, in the wine cellar. I want to know what we have.
It was a child's errand. An errand for someone you wish to send very far down beneath very thick stone, where no fire and no blade would reach. I looked at the folded cloak on the chair. I looked at the cellar key. I understood, with the part of me that is always counting, that I was being put somewhere safe, and that being put somewhere safe meant I would not be where she was when the thing came that she would not name. One word started up in me. No. Or why. Or let me. She kept her face to the window, giving me only her back. She forbade me, with the set of her shoulders, from recognizing what she was doing, because to recognize it as protection would have been to call it love, and that was the one transaction she could not survive. I closed my mouth. I obeyed. The hating of it and the obeying of it happened in the same breath, in the same motion of my body toward the door. I took the folded cloak under my arm as I went. I do not remember deciding to. My hands gathered it the way they gathered everything she left near a doorway, on the assumption it was meant for me. She was the one person in this world I ever obeyed without resentment, and I have spent considerable time since wondering what that means about me. I am not finished wondering. In the cellar it was deep and cold, and the stone swallowed all sound. I never found the sealed jar of blood she had hidden behind the oldest cask, where only my nose should have found it. A full feeding, set by for me, the last gift she ever tried to give, and I walked past it counting bottles and never knew. I heard the lock drop behind me with a small, soft, timed click, and did not understand it. I counted the bottles. There were 311. I counted them again, slower, because counting them slower was the only thing left to do, and because I did not want to stop and listen to how completely the stone had buried the world above me. I did not see her again until the snow. Chapter 6. The Strategist. The present came back the way the present always comes back, cold and stone and the gutter of one torch. Helena came in alone. The instruments on the table were clean. Too clean. She had not touched them in days, and clean instruments in that room were their own kind of confession. She did not pick anything up. She stood across from me and asked the question, without striking me first, and somehow the absence of the blow was more intimate than the blow had ever been.
Where is she?
I don't know.
She looked at me for a long time. Then she reached for the smallest blade and stopped, her roughened hand hovering, and I watched her understand the thing she had been refusing to understand for 3 weeks, that there was nothing in here to cut out of me, because either I was the strongest creature she had ever set herself against, or I was genuinely empty, and she could no longer tell which, and the not knowing had hollowed out her trade from the inside. She left without striking me. Not defeated, just made useless. There is a particular dignity to the way she set the blade down. I respected it. The man who came in after her dismissed the guards and sat down on the cold floor across from me at my eye level, the way two servants might once have sat to share a heel of bread between shifts. Gray-green eyes, ink-stained fingers. He took a pair of narrow spectacles from an inner pocket and did not put them on, only turned them in his hands.
I believe you. That's the inconvenient part. I believe you don't know.
I said nothing. There was a quality to him I recognized and could not place, the precision of a man carrying a weight he has decided to keep carrying as penance. I would learn later the shape of it. A scullery girl, a falsified ledger meant to hide food from the grain purges, an audit, a corrected account he had signed in his own hated handwriting while she was taken away to be hanged for the shortfall. He had survived by signing the truth back into place. His whole rebellion lived in that handwriting. He gestured with the folded spectacles at my left wrist.
I loosened that one. Day 1. A finger width. I wanted to know what you'd do.
I looked at the loose manacle. Truly looked at it, for the first time in 3 weeks. The links hung exactly as he said, exactly as I had refused to consider, a gap a child could have worked free of.
In 3 weeks, you never once moved your hand toward it.
I looked at it for a long, long moment. And then I laughed. Low and broken and entirely without armor, because the joke was on me, and it was a very good joke, the best one in the room. My hand had never moved toward it. It had genuinely never occurred to me to try. To escape, you must have somewhere to escape to, a direction that is yours. And I had spent my whole life making sure I had no direction that was not hers. He had set a door in front of me, and I had not seen it. Because a man does not see doors he has trained himself not to want.
I never noticed.
It came out wondering.
I know.
He stood. He unlocked the loose manacle, then the other, and my arms came down for the first time in 3 weeks, and the pain of the blood returning to them was enormous and far away.
You're free. There's a reason, if it helps you to have one. The longer I keep you in a cell, the more you become a story to the loyalists, the last faithful servant, suffering for a vanished crown. Martyrs are useful to the wrong people, so I'm removing the symbol.
He paused at the door.
And, honestly, I think freedom is going to be worse for you than the silver. I'm sorry about that. It's still true.
At the gate, a woman waited for him. She was tall and pale and silver-haired, with crimson eyes that caught the torchlight, and a pair of slender blades low at her hips, and she moved with the particular relaxed stillness of something that has never once in its long life had to worry about being the most dangerous thing in a room. Her hand rested at the small of his back, not gripping, not displaying, just resting, the way you rest a hand on something you have decided to keep. As the gate ground open, Nathaniel's knee buckled. 3 nights without sleep, I would guess, catching up with him all at once. He did not fall. She shifted, half a step, without looking at him, and his weight passed into her hand and then back onto his own feet before anyone else could have noticed it had gone anywhere at all. She did not fuss. She let him stand by himself the moment he could. That was the whole of it. I had never in my life seen anyone hold up another person and then let go. She turned her crimson eyes on me. On the unmarked skin of my wrist, where the loosened manacle had left no struggle. She understood in one look what I had not done with the gap he'd left me.
Practice.
And she walked away, her hand finding his spine again, and the gate stood open, and the world beyond it was unbearably, monstrously large. I had forgotten what it felt like to stand in a direction that was not hers. Chapter 7. The Mountain. The mountains tried to kill me with great professionalism, and I made notes. I will say this for dying of cold and starvation across an alpine pass. It is a remarkably engaging activity. It requires your full attention. By the second day I had begun negotiating with my own feet, the way a man bargains with a difficult creditor, promising the left one a fire it would never see, threatening the right one with consequences I had no power to deliver. They did not listen. They cracked anyway. I held a small funeral for my smallest toe somewhere above the tree line and counted it, with what dignity remained to me. As the first guest to leave a party I was still pretending to host. My tracks behind me grew creative in their relationship to the idea of a straight line, and I watched them with the detached interest of a man reviewing someone else's poor decisions. The warmth never wavered, north, up, toward the cold. I had stopped pretending it was instinct and not yet admitted it was anything else. I simply walked toward it, because walking toward it was the only verb I had left. There were others on the mountain who had not made it. On the second evening, horns, distant, rebel horns, watchers losing my trail under wind. Ravens followed the blood smell of my feet for a while, patient, optimistic. And once I passed the frozen body of a rebel scout, half buried beside an old search marker carved into a tree, his face turned uphill, toward the wrong slope entirely. Someone else had come looking for a royal corpse up here. He had looked in a direction that was not mine, and the mountain had kept him. I noted the marker. I did not follow it. My directions were not on any tree. There was a village, low in a fold of the slope, and a woman in a faded rose shawl, who came out to me when I stopped at her gate. Chestnut hair gone gray at the temples, warm brown eyes that took one look at my face and my teeth and the bite scars at my collar and understood precisely what I was.
My brother came home from the old levees with marks like that on his neck he wouldn't speak of.
Her voice held steady, flat with the practicality of someone who has measured this exact thing before.
I know what your kind does when it's gone empty. I'd assume you didn't do it near my goats.
She rolled back her sleeve.
There's blood in me. You can have a little. If you fall down dead at my fence, soldiers come asking why, and I've had enough of soldiers.
It was the most honest offer anyone had made me in a long lifetime. No mysticism in it, no temptation, just one survivor doing the cold sums of survival on another. I refused her. I do not entirely know why. I thanked her, and I turned, and I went on. 20 steps up the slope, I understood that I had not refused her with my mind. My body had already chosen a different direction before the words were out. The way it had chosen the cellar door without consulting me. The way it had always chosen first, and left me to narrate after and call the narration a decision.
Those tracks above you are from men who went up looking for a royal corpse and froze for it. If you're following that same smell, you're walking toward something dead.
I did not answer her. I stopped, once, in the middle of a frozen river, where the ice creaked under what little weight was left of me. I said the word out loud.
Closure.
The word I had been using on myself to explain this sounded, in the wind, like exactly the kind of word a conditioned creature uses to justify walking toward the only gravity it has ever known. I looked back toward the warmth of her village. I looked forward toward the white, nothing my mind could not name. I turned away from the warmth and kept walking. The wryness went out of me somewhere on that river. Thought went with it. After that, I was just a body spending the last of itself in one direction. I crested the last pass at an hour that was either dawn or dusk, in a light I had felt only once before, and my body knew exactly where to go before my mind had finished climbing. Chapter 8. What he buried. It came back in pieces, the way buried things come up, not in order, triggered by the land itself. The split pine first. I put my hand on its bark to steady myself, and my palm slipped, and I knew, suddenly and bodily, that it had slipped here before because her blood had frozen to it. Then the black stone shelf, and against my throat the memory of her breath catching, the unbearable lightness of her in my arms. Then the creak under the ice, and my own wrist held over a blue mouth, the image arriving before the story that explained it. Here's the story, finally, in order, because I have stopped refusing it. The rebellion took the palace by dawn. They opened her on the steps of her own throne, collarbone to hip. She would not let them have her body to parade, so she dragged herself out through a servant's passage and into the snow, leaving a dark line behind her on the white, still trying, still, even then, hauling herself toward the mountains by her fingernails, because surrender was the one lesson Grafton's court had never managed to teach her. I came up out of that cellar the hard way. A weak-born vampire does not break stone. He wears it. I put my shoulder to the timed lock until something in the shoulder gave before the wood did, and then I put the other shoulder to it, and when the hinges finally tore free, I climbed up into a palace already burning, and the fire took the cloak's hem and a strip of my back on the way out, and I did not stop to mind either. I found the dark line and followed it. I found her face down in a drift. She looked up at me and laughed, that wet, awful, half-drowned sound, and said,
Leave me. The loyal thing's allowed to stop, you know. Nobody's watching to make you keep going.
I picked her up without answering. The carry was 3 days, and it was not weightless, and I will not pretend it was holy. The first shelter failed when smoke from a shepherd's empty hut drew ravens, and then, behind the ravens, the suggestion of men. The second night I found a goat carcass frozen under a lean-to and did not drink from it. I needed her to take only mine, measured, exact, nothing wild in it. And instead I tore open my own wrist and gave her a single counted mouthful, and by dawn my vision had narrowed to a black tunnel, because I had given her the blood that would have kept me walking. On the third day, the near sun caught us on an open ridge, and I buried us both under the cloak and a heap of snow, while daylight sawed at the edge of me, and when I rose, the skin of my back came away in strips and stayed on the stone. Every step left a clearer scent. Every drop I gave her made me easier to follow, and every place I stopped to rest taught the mountain my exact shape. I knew it. I carried her anyway, to the hollow under the black stone, the one she had described in an alley a lifetime before, mocking a cousin, eating frozen berries, never once imagining she was handing me the only thing that would save her. I laid her in it. I opened my wrist over her blue mouth, and I gave her exactly enough. No more, because I remembered the glass prints and the chapel floor, because too much would choose transformation for her, while she could not consent to anything, and too little would let death finish what they had begun on her own throne steps. I held her at the threshold. It did not save her cleanly. There is no clean version. It trapped her at the door, lashes whitening. The wound at her side refusing to close, death held off by nothing but my arithmetic. Then her hand found my sleeve and gripped it, and she whispered something. I could not quite hear it. For 3 weeks under torture, I gave them the truth. the place was gone from me. Here's the other truth I had buried even from myself. Her words are gone too. The shape remains. It was a command trying and failing to become a plea. It might have been my name. It might have been go. It might have been stay. I did not ask her to say it again, because I was terrified it was an order, and I knew even then, that it was the one order I would have to disobey. So I chose, deliberately, not to know that, too. And then I sat down in the snow beside her, and I made myself forget the way back. I want to be exact, because this was the most exact thing I've ever done. Forgetting was no mere decision. I damaged the knowledge out of myself, methodically, the way you'd put down a faithful animal you could no longer feed. At the creek, I scratched a false map into the ice with my thumbnail, and then broke it under my heel. At the split pine, I carved 3 wrong notches and rubbed her blood into the true mark until sap and scent rotted together into nonsense. Into my own forearm, where the silver of the manacles would later cross it so that even my scars would lie. I cut the landmarks in the wrong order: creek, ridge, chapel, river, pine. I chewed pine resin to spoil the taste of her blood in my mouth. I walked great circles until my own tracks became an argument with no conclusion. I said wrong prayers, east at the black stone, south at the dead fir, down where I climbed, over and over until the true directions blurred and sank. I understood, kneeling there, that my devotion was a loaded weapon, and that any hand could lift it and aim it at her, that the surest way for the rebels to find her was through me, because I would always, always be pointed at her like a compass needle. So I unloaded myself. I made myself a broken instrument. I made my own love unable to betray her, and then I walked down off the mountain into their hands, genuinely not knowing the thing they would spend 3 weeks trying to cut out of me, and I told them the truth 104 times. I reach her now. She is exactly where I left her. The frost has not moved. Her hand is curled slightly around nothing, around the place where my sleeve used to be. I kneel in the snow beside her. I take stock the way I always take stock, and the sum is this. There is almost no blood left in me to give, and finishing the change will almost certainly finish me. And I open my wrist anyway, because that arithmetic was decided in an alley a lifetime ago, and there has never been another answer in it. Her hand uncurls. Chapter 9. The Waking. Her eyes opened, and they were not the eyes I had memorized. I had carried the pale gold of them through all those years the way other men carry a coin they cannot spend. These were silver, pale, clear, lit from somewhere behind, the eyes of a vampire so newly made it has not yet learned the trick the old ones know, of folding all that light down small so as not to frighten the living. She looked at me. I was lying in the snow beside her, gone gray, emptied, my open wrist already closing because there was nothing left in me to keep it flowing. For one long moment, her new face showed me nothing at all, and I genuinely did not know what she would do. I thought she might finish me. I thought she might thank me, which would have been worse. I thought she might simply stand up out of the snow and walk down into the kingdom that no longer had a place for either of us and never look back. And I found, examining the prospect, that I had made my peace with all 3. Then she hesitated. It was the smallest thing. A fraction of a second in which the court-trained mask, the serene, ruthless instrument Grafton had spent years building, simply had no instruction to give her. Because there was no court here, and no witness, and nothing to perform for, and she did not yet know who she was supposed to be in a world that had stopped shaping her. Never once had I seen her without an answer. Her face made a shape I had no name for. Then she bit her own wrist. Hard, clumsy, too strong, her new strength still a stranger's hand on her own arm, and she pressed the wound to my mouth without a single word, and I almost choked on it. Not the blood, the intimacy. Her grip was too tight at first, that newborn strength clamping my jaw, and my whole body remembered, all at once, every rationed cut and every 9-day silence, and every time receiving from her had meant surviving strictly on her terms. I flinched. A lifetime of conditioning told me to refuse it, to wait to be permitted, to drink only what was decided for me. The old shape of us flickered up between us, monstrous and familiar, her hand the deciding hand and mine the kneeling one. She felt me flinch. She stopped, not let go. Stopped. The pressure of her fingers loosened by a fraction, and she moved her wrist back to my mouth in a different motion entirely. Not pressing it in, but holding it there, the way you hold out a thing you are offering rather than the way you administer a thing you control. The smallest correction. The whole distance between an order and a gift, crossed by the width of a fingernail. So I drank from her. For the first time in the whole history of us, the blood ran the other way. It was nothing like the measured cuts of the palace floor. This was offered, freely, hers to give. A sentence she had decided to begin rather than one she was deciding whether to end. She watched me drink with an expression I had never once catalogued, and I have catalogued every expression she owns. Something unrehearsed. Something with no chord in it. Who she was going to be still hung open, and for once I was no fixed point she could organize herself around, only a gray creature in the snow, drinking, while she watched without a script. When I had taken enough to live, her voice came rough, scraped raw by a winter of saying nothing to no one.
Did you want to come back? Or did you just not know how not to?
And here at last, I told the truth without rationing it.
I don't know the difference. I'm not sure I ever will.
It was honest, and it was not the whole of it. And I gave her the rest because she had bitten her own wrist for me, and that bought the rest.
I buried where you were, not just so they couldn't take it out of me. I buried it from myself.
My voice did the thing it does, going soft and slow at the edges.
You guarded yourself against everyone. Every house, every blade, every poison. The one weakness you never bothered to set a guard against was me. And I knew that if I kept knowing where you were, I would come. I would always come. I have never once managed not to come. And I would bring every eye in the kingdom down the mountain on my back. I couldn't trust myself not to ruin you again. So I took away the part of me that could.
I looked at my own hand, the one holding her arm.
It's the only thing I ever did that belonged to me and not to you.
She did not say, "Don't look at me like I'm saving you." She had said it in the alley, sharp and afraid. She had said it in the firelight, as deflection, when she slid the cold cup toward my knee. She had said it without saying it at the window, in the set of her shoulders, forbidding me to recognize what she was doing. She had 3 perfect occasions now to say it again, kneeling in the snow with her wrist at my mouth, with no possible reading of this but salvation. She let me look at her that way. She said nothing. The not saying was, as it has always been with us, the entire thing. Her hand stayed around my wrist after I'd finished. Her silver eyes lifted once, past my shoulder, down toward the kingdom waking below us. Silver itself in that light, vast and no longer hers, full of people who would spend the rest of their lives telling children stories to make them afraid of her name. Something moved across her face that I did not have a word for and was, for once, content not to name. Then she looked back at me and said my name. The full one. The one from the alley, the one she had turned into bait, the one she had spoken to the window glass the last night of her human life. She said it differently this time, not as a tool, not an order, not a thing dragged up out of memory. She said it the way you say a thing you are giving back to its owner. Testing, in the snow, whether a name can be returned after you have used it up. My hand was on her arm. Her hand was on my wrist. The grip was mutual and it was not innocent. None of us are innocent, and snow does not make us so, and her blood in me did not wash the palace floors clean of anything. But it was mutual. A lifetime late, it was finally pointed both directions. The snow came down on both of us. Her eyes stayed silver, stayed open, watching me the way she had never watched anything she did not intend to outlast. Below us, the kingdom went about its mourning, certain it had buried us both. What happens next between us has not been decided. The rebels have no say in it now, nor the dead court, nor the mountain that kept so many other bodies and gave us back to each other by accident. Not even, for the first time in all the years I have loved her, by her.
I hope I kept you company with my story. It would mean so much for you to like and subscribe because it helps me make more. I'll see you in the next one.